How are you? I hope fully recharged from that beautiful break. We are now going to continue on from where we left off in part 5. We're going to take those segments and now convert them into images using a platform called Leonardo.ai. Let's get it. Here we are in N8N. This is the last workflow we were working on before we took that beautiful break. So let's exit out, and we're now going to create another workflow. And we're going to start this workflow with some of the nodes that we had created in the first half of this epic journey. Let's pop open a second tab with N8N. And in this second N8N tab, let's have the segment spoken audio workflow open. And let's actually pop open another N8N tab. And in this one, let's have the TTS workflow open. When we build out this next workflow, we're going to be copying several nodes from the segment spoken audio workflow and the TTS workflow. To start, we're going to copy the get script node. You can find it in the segment spoken audio workflow. Copy, paste. And of course, we have to add a trigger. We're going to manually trigger this workflow. Perfect. Clean that up. And the next node after that is going to be a get segments node. So let's copy that right here. And connect this. Clean that up. And let's run a quick test to make sure that works. Beautiful. Next up, we're going to add a node that is provided to us by N8N. We're going to add an OpenAI message and model node. And let's start by setting up the credential for this node. Let's click create new credential. And we can find an API key by coming over to our OpenAI platform dashboard. Specifically, we have to come over to the API keys page and create an API key. I'll create an API key called AAIVA2 because I already have one called AAIVA. Anyhow, it just has to be called something unique. This can be in any project we like, and we need all permissions. Let's click create secret key and copy the key that is provided to us into the API key field in N8N. And we can leave this blank if we created this API key in our default OpenAI project. And this is the correct URL. And next, let's click save. And if this works, we should get some confirmation that it did work. And indeed, we do see this green snack bar that says connection tested successfully. So fantastic. And let's rename this just so we know what we're looking at. Let's call this OpenAI API AAIVA, right? I'm just tagging everything with AAIVA so I know it's related to this process we're going through. And let's click save. Beautiful. You can close that. And now we can select from one of the many models that OpenAI provides. I'm going to go with GPT-4o. And the next thing to do is provide a prompt that we're going to send to GPT-4o. And let's switch this prompt field to expression mode and expand it. And here is the prompt that we're going to be using. You can find this prompt in the accompanying GitHub repo. And we have some variables in this prompt, right? Variables are denoted by these double curly braces. And you can see if we've executed the prior nodes, then we should see these variables populated on the right side in this expanded view of the field. And yeah, excuse me, by the way, this is probably offensive, and that's not my intention behind this. Don't get me twisted. I'm just speaking completely freely in this video. Anyhow, I do not come in disrespect. That's not my message at all. Okay, so that looks fantastic. Let's close this. And the last thing to do is we need to output this node as JSON, right? And we can do that by toggling on this switch. If we take a look at this prompt again, you can see that we're asking the model or the AI system, in this case, GPT-4o, to respond to us in this exact JSON format. And we can automatically parse that into JSON by turning on this switch. Let's now test this and see if everything is working. And it looks great. Here's a prompt that we can send to an image generation model to produce one accompanying image for a particular scene of our overall script. To summarize the overall process of this entire video, pretty much what we're doing is we're taking some idea that originates from our mind, right? Then we're taking that idea and imprinting it into the format of a script. Then we're converting that script into audio. Then we're segmenting that audio into parts, right? Or chunks. Then we're converting each chunk into an image. Then we're going to convert each image into a video. And once we have a video for each scene or part of our movie, we're going to stitch it all together and make a video. That, in a nutshell, is the overall process of what we're doing in this entire journey. Anyhow, let's move on. We have now arrived at the image generation part of this adventure. And let's start by adding an HTTP request node. And we're going to use this node to interact with a platform that goes by the name of Leonardo.ai. You should be able to sign up on the free plan. That should be enough for this video. But in order to use the Leonardo.ai API, you'll need to pay, I believe, $9. If you want to avoid this, you can just find some images that you like, and those will be the images that represent each scene of your movie. Honestly, that might yield better final product depending on the type of content you want to create, but we're showcasing AI techniques in this video. And you can log in to Leonardo by clicking that button, and it'll direct you to app.leonardo.ai. And there's a ton of tools that come inside of this platform. We're going to be showcasing a few of them. And here is where you can sign up for the API. I've already done so, but that's where you'll pay the $9 for access to the API. You can get an API key here, right? You can provision an API key by clicking this button. We'll do that shortly, right? Let's come back to N8N. We're now going to configure this HTTP request node to interact with the image generation endpoint provided by Leonardo. So I pieced this together from a number of endpoints available on the Leonardo documentation. So I've included all of this in the accompanying README, right? A lot of information here. The exact pages that we're going to be referencing are this one, and this one. So let me show you what I mean. This is going to be a post request. The URL that we're going to use is this one. We're going to have to create a generic credential type. The type of credential will be a header auth credential. And we're going to have to create another one for interacting with Leonardo. And the name of this will be authorization. The value will be bearer. Let me show you in expression mode. It'll be bearer space, and then we're going to have to copy an API key that we provision in the Leonardo AI dashboard. We'll call this AAI VA and click generate and copy the API key into, and then here, right? So bearer space, and then you paste in the API key. And to stay organized, let's call this Leonardo AI auth header AAIVA, right? Let's click save. So we have our header set up. Beautiful. And the next thing that we're going to do is set up the rest of this node, obviously. So it's quite a few things. So let's run through it. Let's start by setting up the headers. We will only need one. Let's add an accept header, and the value will be application/JSON. Next, let's configure the body. And we want to provide the body using JSON. And let's switch this JSON field to be in expression mode. Then pop this open and open up a set of curly braces. I like to indent the values. So the first value is going to be the model ID that we're going to be using to generate images. So this is just like OpenAI. You remember how we could select different models provided by OpenAI? Here we're selecting a model provided by Leonardo AI. A lot of the models provided by OpenAI are text-to-text models, right? They generate text. The models provided by Leonardo.ai are image generation models. So if we come over to this page, it shows us a lot of information. And for example, there's these models that we can choose from. These are all different image generation models. And we're going to be using the ones that allow us to also control the style. So the ones that we can control the style on are going to be Flux, Lucid Realism, and Phoenix models. So let's choose one of these models. Let's go with Flux Dev, right? So if we copy that ID into here, that's how we select Flux Dev. Next, let's provide some values that get a little bit technical, but hopefully they're intuitive enough. And it is pretty annoying, but we have to provide the values as the correct data type, which is what we're doing in these little JavaScript snippets. And the next value is hopefully going to make a lot of sense. We're providing the prompt, and the value of the prompt is going to be our image prompt, right? And I think we will need to surround this in quotes. Yep. The next value is going to be the number of images we want to generate per prompt. It can be useful to generate maybe like 4 images at a time, because when working with AI, it often doesn't get the image perfect, right? So you kind of got to see a couple different outputs and pick the best one. So yeah, I started writing an open quote there, but yeah, this one doesn't need to be in quotes. The next value is the width, right? And this is going to be 864. That's the widest we can make an image for vertical video aspect ratio. So because we're going to make social media content on the other side of this process, right? We want to post this stuff to as many social media platforms as possible. Most social media platforms prefer vertical video, right? 1920, 1080p. So pretty much the logic behind these numbers is I'm choosing the widest aspect ratio, right? That supports vertical video. On Leonardo, that's 864 by 1536, right? So I'm gonna provide this. It would be nice if it did the full 1080 by 1920, but we got to work with this. It's not too bad. And remember, we're going to eventually convert these images into videos. The next value is going to be the style UUID. And we can come here and see the various styles we can choose from. So choose whichever one of these appeals to your taste. I'm going to go with vibrant. And this has to be provided in quotes, I believe. And the last value we're going to provide in this JSON is going to be the enhance prompt key. And this is going to be a Boolean value of false, because we want our image prompt to be sent to the model as is. Okay, so now we're ready to test this out. Great, so that looked like it worked. Before we take a look at the images though, let's zoom out. I think this is going to be easier for you to follow along with if we pretty much walk through it. So let's run the whole automation one time to confirm it works. Bingo. So you can see 3 items were output by this HTTP request node. So if we switch from schema mode on the output to table mode, we can see 3 image generation IDs, 1 for each segment of our script. So to walk through this, we pulled in our script, then we pulled in the segments of our script. You can see 1 item was output by this node, 3 were output by this node. If we come over to Airtable, we can see we have 1 script checked as active. That script has 3 segments, 13, 14, 15. Those are the same row IDs that line up with the segments table, right? And here's our masterpiece. And what happened was we converted each script segment into an image prompt, right? So same thing. If you're not seeing this, switch from schema mode to table mode on the output of the OpenAI node. And you can see 3 image prompts. And each image prompt was sent to Flux Dev hosted by Leonardo.ai. So if we come over to Leonardo.ai, launch the application, and here we are in the dashboard. If we come over to the image page, we should see 3 images that line up with our image prompts, right? So a serene night sky filled with countless stars and a large gentle moon. So that's what we see here, right? And at this point, the images might not be listed in the same order as our segments. We'll fix that shortly. But anyhow, the next image prompt is a stunning portrayal of endless possibilities. A stunning portrayal of endless possibilities, right? And just to be exhaustive, a serene and inspiring landscape depicting a sunlit field of wildflowers. That's this one. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's now move on. But actually, before we move on, let me share some games. So pretty much the vision is to make a beautiful piece of media on the other side of this video, or enable you to do so. AI is obviously a tool that you have to learn to leverage by assuming this stuff is going to come out with a very cohesive series of images. That's just not realistic. So what you have to do in practice is find images that will blend seamlessly when they're seen in sequence. And there's some more advanced tricks that you can use this platform for as well. That's why I'm suggesting this tool as the platform that we learn with, because you can see here they have training features where you can fine tune these models on maybe images of you or images of the characters you want in your media. It's not in scope of this video. That's a whole nother topic as far as how to fine tune these models so that they can help you have very consistent final product. There's some other tricks that you have to do. For example, there's models that will take the end of one video clip or one image and another image or another video clip, and then create another video that connects the two, right? That's a way that you can have seamless transitions, or I guess a semblance of seamless transitions. You also have to have good storytelling. You have to be creative. You have to iterate a lot with a model. It's definitely labor intensive to make something that is very cohesive as far as AI generated film goes, but I'll leave it there. I'm sharing game with you. I'm really sharing a very flexible system in this video, and let's move on. Before we move on though, let's rename this node to be called Gen Image with Leonardo.ai. That's going to allow us to more easily reference it in the next node. And the next node will be an HTTP request node as well. This request will be a GET request, and the URL will be this value. This URL will contain a variable, so let's switch to expression mode, pop this open, paste this in, and you can see we get the generation ID from the previous node, and this node is going to allow us to check if the image is finished generating. So the next thing we need to do is configure the header. We already have a Leonardo AI header, right? You can select that one. And we have to add a plain text header. This one's going to be accept. And the value will be application/JSON. And I think that's good to go. So if I test this, it looks like it worked. Let's switch back to schema mode. And here's the output. Not suitable for work, true. That's probably because the script is sus. But if we collapse that, yeah, you can see status complete. So let's save that and test it. Beautiful. So what we're going to do next is add an if node, and what we're going to do is check to see if the status is equal to complete. And let's slide this over. We're going to get the status here. Beautiful. And if the status is complete, we'll continue on. If it's not, what we'll do is add a wait node, and we'll wait 3 seconds. You can tweak this to your liking and come back here, right? So let's click save and test this again. So here we are generating the images, right? Waiting for the first image to be generated, the second, then the third. Okay. Long story short is we're polling every 4 seconds to check if each image generation call comes back with a status of complete. Hopefully that makes sense. Next, we're going to add an HTTP node that will allow us to download each generated image from Leonardo. So after it's finished generating, we'll get a URL back, right? Each image is going to be a JPEG image. And now you can copy some nodes from the TTS workflow. And the nodes that we want are these three. Copy, paste. Yep. And let's link this up, save, clean it up, and test this out. Okay. And what's happening is we're uploading the image from Leonardo into Dropbox and then getting a direct download link to it, right? And the last thing to do is insert these download links into the segments table of Airtable, right? We want to put these image URLs here. So let's add an Airtable update record node. And it already connected for us. And the base we're going to be updating is AAIVA, of course. And the table will be, it's going to be the segments table. And let's match on our ID, capital ID. And let's close these. Here's where we're pulling the segments. So this is the ID of each row. And the main thing we're updating here is the image related fields, right? Or the main thing we're updating here are the image related fields. So the image URL is going to be found here. The image prompt is going to be found here. And let's store a direct copy of the image. The field value for this is going to be expression mode, right? And that looks right to me. I think that's good for now. We already have these values, so they should stay the same because we're not providing any new value for them. So if we test this, come to Airtable, if this works, these should get populated. And they do, look at that. So hopefully you can see this starting to come together. Okay, I tested this a little bit more and I can see that sometimes the duration timestamps for each segment are getting overwritten or reset to 0. So you can see they come in properly and I don't update them, right? I leave these fields blank, but they still get reset to 0. So if we come back to Airtable, you can see, right? They've been reset to 0. So in that case, what we have to do is resegment our audio. Great. And now we have our durations and they look good, right? Each segment ends when the next one begins. And what we'll do just to make sure we don't lose these timestamps is re-update them even though they're not changing. This allows us to guarantee that we don't lose these timestamps. So, and it ends a little bit quirky. It does some unexpected things at times, but hey, no tool is ever going to be perfect. So if we come out of here, save, and then rerun this workflow. We can see we get updated images and still have our timestamps preserved. Fantastic. So that does it for this workflow. And let's rename this to be called segments to images. And we're about to move on to part or chapter 7. But before we do that, I want to show you one little fine-tuning trick. All right, let's make this as quick as possible. So let's exit out of the segments to images workflow and let's create another workflow. This workflow is going to start with a Airtable get a record node. We're going to be pulling from the AAIVA base, and the table we're pulling from now is the miscellaneous table. So if we switch over to Airtable and come over to the miscellaneous table, let's add 2 images here that are going to act as quote unquote init images. The idea of what we're doing here is we're taking some image that we like or that has elements of something we like, and we're going to feed that into our image generation process along with our prompt so that the final image is more closely aligned to what we're aiming for. So this will make a lot of sense shortly. So let's add a item into this miscellaneous table. Let's call this Jackie Chan. And let's upload an image of Jackie Chan. Right? And then let's upload an image of Denzel Washington. Right? Okay, so now that we have that set up, let's come back to this workflow and let's finish setting up this Airtable node. So we'll need a record ID from the miscellaneous table. And a quick way to do this is right click on one of these rows, right? And copy the record URL, open up a new tab, paste that in, and you should be able to see a rec value in the URL. Copy that and paste that in here. And then you should be pulling in that record from Airtable. And that's the case, Jackie Chan. And the next node we're going to add is an HTTP request node. And this is going to be a post request. And here's the URL. By the way, all this information is referenced in the accompanying GitHub repo. And let's reference the Leonardo auth header. And we're also going to need to provide a header. This will be an accept header with value application/JSON. And for the body, we're going to specify the body using fields. And this is the value we need, JPEG. And let's test this out. And we get what's called a pre-signed URL from AWS. This is a bit technical, but all we're doing here is uploading an init image, right? In this example, it's an image of Jackie Chan. We're uploading that image of Jackie Chan to a place where one of the models in Leonardo AI system can download it. So let's rename this. Let's call this get pre-signed URL and move on to the next node, which is also going to be an HTTP request node. And in this node, we're going to download the image from Airtable. Here we have a link to the image. And let's test this out. There we go. And the next step is to upload it to AWS. It's a little bit confusing. We have to get a pre-signed URL from AWS first, and then download the image from Airtable, and then upload the image to AWS using that pre-signed URL. If you've never seen it before, it's a little bit confusing, but anyhow, welcome to reality. Here we are with another HTTP request node. And this one is going to be a little bit elaborate, but we will walk through it step by step. So this will be a post request. And this is going to be the upload init image URL for the URL field. And we don't need any headers. We now can specify the body, which is going to be a form data body type. And there's quite a number of fields that we have to provide. So let's run through it. The first one is going to be content type. The value is going to be image JPEG. And the next value is going to be bucket. And this is going to be found in this JSON structure that's in the fields key. So we have to parse it like so, right? That's the bucket in AWS where we're going to upload the Jackie Chan image to. Let's add another parameter. This one is going to be XAMZ algorithm. Then let's add XAMZ credential. This is why we don't need an auth header to upload to Amazon. The authentication is provided in the form fields. Anyhow, the next form data parameter is going to be XAMZ date. This is also from this fields key. Then we need XAMZ security token. And then we need key. And then we need policy. And then we need signature. And finally, we need an N8N binary file parameter type. The name of this is going to be file. And then the input data field name is going to be data. All right, it says expired. I think these pre-signed URLs don't live for too long. Bingo. So now we've uploaded the image to Amazon. And for reference, let's also store the ID of this image in Amazon in Airtable. So let's come to Airtable, update a record. We're going to be updating the AAIVA base, miscellaneous. And we're going to match on the record ID And the init image ID is gonna come from here, from the get pre-signed URL. So let's test this. That worked. And we should see a value here, and we do, right? So what we're gonna do next is use this ID of this image that we uploaded to AWS. And the way we're gonna do that is provide a prompt and this image. And we should, on the other side of it, get an image that incorporates aspects of our prompt and the init image. Now, hopefully you see why this is called an init image. Okay, so let's test this out in another workflow. So let's rename this before we start that other workflow. Let's call this helper upload init image. Beautiful. And let's exit out of here and create another workflow. And we're going to copy some nodes from the segments to images workflow. The ones we want are these 4. So let me move this over like this so we can copy it easily. I drag and highlight these 4 nodes, copy. And then let's come to this new workflow, paste them in. It's funny that that comes over here again. And we'll trigger this manually. To do that right, it comes over here again. And let's connect that like so. And let's pop open the gen image with Leonardo.ai node and expand this. And instead of the prompt coming from our script, let's say for testing purposes, let's say a man smiling. So let's test this out by running it. Let's move this like so, or clean it up rather. Great. So if we pop this open, here's the URL of the generated image. So it should be a man smiling, quite cute, very handsome. So now let's show image to image generation. Let's pop open the gen image with Leonardo.ai node. And we're going to configure the body. We're going to add a couple extra properties, and we're going to have to tweak the model ID, I believe. So let's see. We might have to tweak the style ID too. Let's see. So here is the link to the documentation that I'm referencing. So it has this recipe, and let's use the same model ID, because not all of the models that Leonardo AI offers support this image to image generation feature. So let's use this as our model. This is Leonardo Diffusion. And we need to add another property. Copy that right? Called init image ID. And this is going to be here, right? The one of Jackie Chan. And init strength. And this needs to be a number, like so. So now we can save and rerun this. Great. So let's take a look at the image. See? So this was our original image, right? You can see it's incorporating elements of the image. To test this further, let's try a different image. So let's exit out of this. Before we exit out of it, though, let's rename it helper image to image gen. And then exit out and then come back here. And instead of the image of Jackie Chan, let's use the image of Denzel Washington and get the rec ID from the URL like so. Switch this out and run this. And if this works, we should see another image ID here. There we are. So let's copy that. And sure, we can save it. And let's come to the image to image gen workflow. Configure the gen image with Leonardo.ai node. Pop this open and let's switch out the image for this. Right. Let's take a look. Right. It's incorporating aspects of the image of Denzel. And we can strengthen this. So instead of 0.4, let's make it 0.8. Test it again. Great. So let's take a look. All right, it's pretty much Denzel at that point. So you can use this technique, right? You can download the images and replace the AI generated images in your segments with ones that are a little bit more fine-tuned. And the other approaches to use on top of this would be fine-tuning the underlying model on specific images as well. And yeah, so let's move on to part or chapter 7. We have now arrived at the video generation piece of this journey. So let's get going and take a look at what this is going to look like. Here we are in N8N, and let's start by creating another workflow. And we can jumpstart the building of this workflow by coming to one of our prior workflows. For example, the segments to images workflow. And we want these two nodes, the get script and get segments nodes. Let's copy that into this new workflow we're building and add a manual trigger. Connect that to the start of our AI automation. Save that, tidy it up, test it. And that works great. And the next thing we're going to do is add an if node. This if node is going to check if one of the segments in our script has been marked for video generation. So video generation is quite expensive. So we want to make sure we're actively specifying whether a segment is going to be generated into a video or not. And the way that we do that is by checking this checkbox, right? If you were to check these two rows of our segments table, the first two segments would be converted into a video. So you definitely want to be having only one of these rows checked, especially during testing. And take your time with this. You'll get familiar with it, and then you'll know the cost implications. But yeah, slow and steady, I would recommend. So back in the if node in the end-to-end workflow that we're currently building, what we want to check for is if the make video column of the current row exists. I think we'll go exists and, right? And we want to make sure that if it exists, the value is true. Right? Did I get that right? Exists. Yeah. This is how we want it. We want to make sure the value exists and that the make video property of that row is checked true. So let's test this out. One item was checked true and the other were checked false, right? So if we check another row and test again, we should have 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom, right? So that's working as expected. And let's just leave 1 checked. Test that again. And then move on. The next node that we're going to add on the true branch, we don't need anything on the false branch. So we're only going to be worrying about the true branch. So the next node that we need to add on the true branch is an HTTP request node. And this is going to be the node that we're going to use to interact with FAL.ai, which is a platform you can use for generating video. So let's import the FAL.ai curl command like so. And this scaffolds it out for us, but we will need to configure this. So let's start with configuring the auth header. Then we'll configure the body. Once we're logged into FAL, we should see something like this in our dashboard, and we can come over to the Explore page to check out all of the models that are provided. There's quite a few, and you can search for the model you're looking for if you know what you want. For example, we're going to be using one of the Kling series models. There are definitely others you can go with. And we're going to be going with the premium version of Kling, which is actually listed here. So let's click try it to be taken to the page for this version of Kling. And if we click on this API tab, we can see an example curl request that we can use to help us set up this HTTP node right here. So we have the right URL, right? Now we need to set up an authentication header. This is going to be a header auth, and we're going to be creating a new credential. The name of this will be authorization. And the value is going to be key space followed by one of our FAL.ai API keys. And let's switch to expression mode so you can see what's going on. And let's come over to our account API keys, and let's provision an API key called AAIVA. And let's copy the API key and paste it here, right? So key space, and then we paste in the API key. And let's also rename this to stay organized. FAL.ai API header AAIVA. Save. Great. And we can delete this because we don't want to provide our header as plain text. And the next thing to do is provide some prompt for testing. Let's say birds and bees. And here is where we put a reference to one of the images that we generated for a particular segment of our script. Use the Dropbox URL. And you can see here that I scaffolded the duration field with a value of 5 or 10. So when you're using a particular video generation model, the way that they work at the moment, right, is they generate a fixed duration length clip, right? Or I guess they can generate up to a certain duration length clip. In the case of Kling, you can generate either 5 or 10-second video clips. So you remember that validate segment durations workflow? Later, we might want to add a check on that workflow to make sure that each segment duration is, for example, below 5 seconds or below 10 seconds. It depends on the creative vision at the end of the day. But anyhow, just giving you a good framework here in this video. So pretty much what we want to do in that field is provide an expression like so, right? So assuming the segments are all less than 10 seconds, this will work. As a heads up, I think we're good for now with our segments. But yeah, let's test this out. And that looks promising. So if we come back to our Kling account and come over to requests, we can see that a video is being rendered. So we're on the right track. Okay, it eventually finished rendering. It took about 3 or 4 minutes. This was the output. Our prompt was birds and bees. And if we come over to Airtable and take a look at the image for our first segment, here it is. All right, so we have the yellow flowers with the sunrise or sunset. And right, we have those elements here as well with the birds and the bees layered on top. Fantastic. So I would recommend you do one clip at a time when you're testing this because it will get expensive. If you come over to the playground, it gives you a cost estimate. It's $1.40 per 5-second clip, right? So it adds up pretty fast. Anyhow, the next thing that we're going to do is store a reference to the request ID in Airtable, just so we know what we're looking at. So let's do that and wrap up this workflow. So here we have the request ID. So let's add an Airtable update a record node. And we want to update a record in the AAIVA base, in the segments table, and we will match on our ID, capital ID for fun. So let's collapse this just to more easily see what's going on, or minimize this. And the get segments node is what we want. So we're going to match on our ID. And just to make sure we don't lose any data, let's map the durations and the script segment, the video render request ID, which is found here. Beautiful. So let's keep it simple for now. You could make a custom video prompt, but what we'll do is just forward our image prompt as our video prompt. And eventually, when the video finishes rendering, we'll store a reference to it here and here. So that's coming soon, but I think we're good for now. And let's run a test, save. So if you come over to Airtable, we still have our segment durations. And we're not seeing our video render request ID. There we are. Let's double check. We have our video prompt and we still have our durations and everything looks Gucci. Fantastic. So let's rename this image to video. This one gen video, and I think this is okay. We'll just leave this as it is. Save that, and we're good to move on. Let's now build another workflow, and this next workflow is going to loop through the segments of our script, and as a result of this workflow that we're looking at right now, let me tidy this up. We're going to have a reference to the generation ID in FAL, right? For that particular video segment. And we can check in FAL if that video has finished rendering. And if it has, we'll download it and store a reference to it in the appropriate cell in Airtable, right? So let's come back over here, save that, exit out, and let's create another workflow and get going. To jumpstart us on this next workflow, let's come over to the segments to images workflow and copy these two nodes, paste them in, and we're going to trigger this manually. Connect that, tidy this up, run a quick test. And the next node is going to be an if node. And here we're going to check for the existence of a video render request ID. And did I do this right? I think so. Let's test this. It shows red, but it appears to work correctly. Anyhow, if we have a video render request ID, then what we want to do is download that video from FAL and then store a reference to it in the corresponding row of the segments table. So downloading it is pretty easy. We're going to add a HTTP request node on the true branch. The true branch represents video segments that we've rendered, right? And all we have to do is pull in the video render request ID and insert it into this URL. So that's the beginning of the URL, and we have to insert the video render request ID here. I think that should be it. Okay. We also have to include our header, which we've already created. Let's test this again. Bingo. So here's a URL that we can use to access the generated video. Perfect. And next, what we want to do is store a reference to that video in Airtable. So let's add an Airtable update record node. And the base will be AAIVA. Table will be segments. And let's match on RID, capital ID for fun. Let's collapse this. And the if node contains the object that met the criteria, right? The criteria being the existence of a video render request ID. So the fields we want to map are the ID. I think we can leave most of this as is. Just to be safe, let's also map the durations. And what we're interested in now is the video and video URL. So here's how we reference the video. Bingo. And let's include a link to the video URL as well. That can be found here. And this field is very nuanced because if we are not careful, we can accidentally render videos more times than we would like. Remember, each time you render a video, it's quite expensive, right? So I'm conscientiously resetting this to off every time we run any of these workflows. Having this turned on true should be very intentional. But if you want to keep the value of this make video switch as it is, you can do something along the lines of this, I believe. Let's see what's happening here. So that does make sense. So this will only get passed through if the field exists. Let's test this out. Still works. And if we come to Airtable, we get our video referenced, as you can see. And if we scroll over, this is still unchecked. So once again, be aware of what you're doing. Pay attention, because if you're not careful, you'll burn dozens of dollars, if not hundreds of dollars. And if you really get into this, you'll burn thousands of dollars. So anyhow, let's take a look. And here we have our video. Amazing. So let's tidy this up, save it, and call this store video in Airtable. And let's rename this before we move on. Let's call this download gen video metadata. Perfect. In the next part, or in the next chapter of this saga, this epic journey, we're going to stitch all of the media assets that we've created up till now together and produce a final video. So let's back out or exit out of this workflow, and let's create another workflow that we'll use to stitch all of the assets we've created thus far together. And we're going to be using a platform called JSON to Video to do this. As a heads up, you'll need to sign up for JSON to Video, and you will get some free credits when you sign up. But when those free credits run out, you'll need to pay $50. So if you're just testing this for now and getting a feel for it, make sure the videos that you render are very short so that those free credits can be stretched as far as possible. So let's get to it by adding some nodes that we've created prior. So the get script and get segments nodes. And this will be triggered manually. And let's tidy this up and run a quick test. Great. And the next node that we're going to add is going to be an edit fields or set node. And let's place that right here. And if we pop that open and switch this to JSON, and then switch this JSON field to expression mode, let's pop this open like so. And the value that we'll put here is going to be a JSON. And the first key is going to be comment. We can put whatever we want here. So we're looping over the segments of our script. And what we're doing is turning each segment into a scene of our final video or movie. So the next thing is going to be an elements key, right? In here, we're listing all of the multimedia elements that, when stacked on top of each other, make our scene. So we're going to be using the video for now, or the image. And then once we have all of the videos, right, laid out next to each other, we're going to stack that on top of the audio of our movie. This will make sense shortly if this is sounding confusing. So what we'll do is check to see if we have the URL of a video in the row of the current segment. And if that's the case, we'll include the video. If we don't have a link to some video, right, we'll just use the image URL. So let's check for, there we go, video URL. And if that's the case, we'll return this object. And if we don't have a video URL, we will return this object. Bingo. And let me see what's going on. Are we doing this correct? It looks okay to me. Let's test this out. Yeah, that's right. Let's pop this open. It shows as an object here, which is confusing, but it comes out as we want when we run it. Anyhow, if we run this, let's confirm it all works. And it does. And if we look at this in table mode, we see the object for each scene. I can see here now that I'm checking for the Dropbox URL, but I'm referencing the Airtable URL. So just to be consistent, let's use this like so. This probably will work as it is, but attention to detail. Great. So let's test this again. Yep. And now we have our Dropbox URL. And in the case of when we have a video, it's the direct link on file. Probably we should upload this to Dropbox. Let's leave this as it is for now. I think you can piece things together. Hopefully you have a general framework of how the system works. And now we're going to use JSON to video. So JSON to video does not have any built-in nodes in N8N. So we're going to have to build an HTTP request ourselves. And here's the curl that we'll use to scaffold out this node for us. And we will need to add another header. So let's delete this plain text header and create a new credential. This will be a header auth. Let's click create new credential. Okay, so if we come over to JSON to video, I've already signed up. So I can come into my dashboard. And then there's this page right here where you can find your API keys. So this is going to be x-api-key. Then the value is going to be your JSON to video API key. And let's rename this JSON to video API header AAIVA. Save. Fantastic. And content type for the header will be application JSON. And to do a preliminary test, let's just test this out before we configure this. And that looks like it worked. If we come to our JSON to video dashboard and come over to our render logs, okay, it says error, but that is the right date. So it says it can't download this. All right, that's funny. So what we'll do is pass the link to this video. We'll hard code it for this preliminary test. So for each segment, it's going to be the same video. Great. That looks like it worked. If we reload the render logs, that makes sense. So for each segment, right, we have 3 segments of our script. We're rendering a video. And yes, this makes sense. This is the top part. We're not including the details of the aspect ratio, so it's clipping it a little bit awkwardly, but that was the first of the 3, second of the 3, third of the 3. So that's working as expected. So what we need to do now is configure this, and we should get our expected output. What we're going to do now is temporarily disconnect these 2 nodes. Let's put that here. And let's actually rename this node to stitch video together. That can chill there for now. Let's add an aggregate node. And we're going to aggregate all data into a single list, and the name of the output field will be scenes. Let's test that out. And beautiful. We get all of our segments or scenes in a single array. So next up, we're going to reference those segments, which is now in a single scenes value, right? In this node that sends the JSON to the JSON to video API. So let's connect that, tidy this up, save, edit this node. So the body is now going to become this. Beautiful. So we have the spoken audio URL, and then we have all of our scenes. So let's run this. That looks like it worked. And if we come to the render logs and refresh, we see our video is rendering. Hopefully it's finished in a minute or two. Take a closer look at this JSON to video config. So we're specifying a vertical video aspect ratio. That's what Instagram story means. That's 1080p by 1920 high. We want this in the highest level of quality. You can put medium or low here. Sometimes when you want to test quickly, you want to render something fast with really pixelated looking video. Sometimes that's useful. But here we'll put it to high. Here is where we outline the scenes. And these are the elements that are going to sit on the entire video. So we have our scenes laid out, right, in a timeline. Then we're going to lay those scenes on top of the audio version of our script, right? And we made sure that they're the same exact length. So let's reload the render logs. And this is finished. Let's take a look.
Respect God over everything, provide overwhelming value to others, pay back all debts, live abundantly, and free dream and live bigger than anyone has ever done so before.
Okay, we're getting closer. So there's one little issue that we have to address. So we have to make sure that when we retrieve the segments, that they come in the right order. So let's order them by ID, ascending, and test this out again. Because we checked our first segment for being converted into a video, not our last one, right? If we come to Airtable, we can see that we only have a video for the first segment, right? So let's refresh the render logs of JSON to video. It's finished now. And let's take a look at our masterpiece.
Respect God over everything, provide overwhelming value to others, pay back all debts, live abundantly, and free dream and live bigger than anyone has ever done so before.
So let's be honest, that was pretty trash. But what we're going to do in the final part is show how we can use these AI automation techniques in combination with manual editing techniques to create higher quality outputs. Now let's have some fun. So let's call this JSON to video. And let's take a look at all of the workflows that we've created. Let's push ourselves to actually create something of quality. We can use these workflows modularly, right? That's kind of the thesis of this video. And the general process of how we've been moving through things has been, we have some idea originating in our mind. We imprint that into a script, convert that script into some audio format. We segment the audio. We convert each segment into an image, and then we convert each image into a video, and then we stitch all this stuff together. That's the general process that we've been following And let's play around with creating another script. So I think I have something in mind. So what we'll do is come to our scripts table. This one is dead. We're now going to work on a second script. And I like the theme of body dysmorphia. I think it's very relatable. All right, that's going to be our final script. So we have that checked as active. So let's now run the text-to-speech workflow.
Insecurity is very relatable.
Let me test out another voice.
I must not fear.
Switch out the voice. Here's where we do so. But that voice is a lot better. Would you agree?
Insecurity is very relatable. Most people are insecure about something. Maybe it's the size or shape of a body part. Maybe it's their economic status. Or maybe it's to do with aspects of their life journey. Remember that God created you in his or her image.
Not bad. So let's move on. The next thing that we're going to do is segment our audio. So here it is. Let's test this out. Great. So here we have our segments. If you come over here, let's filter where full script is equal to 2. And we're only seeing the segments related to the script we're working on. This is super annoying. There we go. I want the segments to line up with the sentences. So let's resegment this. There we go. There we go. You see? It gave us a segment for each sentence. The next workflow we're going to use is segments to images. So let's run this. And now that I'm seeing this, I think it would be nice to have some helpers for this. I think we already have one helper. Yeah, I think it would be nice to have 2 helpers. One additional helper for just doing the image prompt generation, and then another helper for converting the image prompts into images. So after this test, we'll make 2 extra helpers for this one. That pretty much does the first half of this in one helper and does the second half of this in the other helper. I think that'll make it even more modular. Almost done. There we go. So if we come to our segments table, here we have our images. And if we come to the scripts table, I think we can loop through the segments here. That's dope. That's dope. All right, let's quickly create 2 helpers. One for the first half of this segments to images workflow, and the other for the second half of it. All right. Let's use these 2 tabs that we already have open. Let's do the first half of this segments to images workflow here and the second half of it here. So let's create another workflow. This one's going to be called helper generate image prompts. And this should be pretty simple. We're just going to copy this part, paste, and then we just have to update Airtable. So let's connect that and delete the image related information, but we want the image prompt. So I think that's it. So let's test this out. Okay, this failed. Image expects an array. Let's make this fixed. Let's see if that works. Okay. Let's test it out one more time. We should see these get updated, but nothing else. Yeah, you see? Prompts get updated, but nothing else. Great. So that's amazing because we can scaffold out our image prompts and then adjust them if there's something specific we want to do on one of them, and pass that on to the second half, right? Which we'll do now. So let's exit out of the TTS workflow and create another workflow. Call this helper gen images. And what we'll do is pull in our segments and generate our images and then update Airtable. Let's check what's going on here. So yeah, we want to keep the image prompts as they are, and I think everything else is good to go. So let's test this out. Okay, there was an issue there. That makes sense. Our image prompt is now given to us by the segment in Airtable. So let's replace that. Try it out again. And then, yep, see? Oh, that's funny. So let's regenerate our image prompts. Then let's make sure we keep our image prompts. That'll probably be okay if we switch that to fixed, but just to be sure, let's pass it through. Great. That completed. Now let's rerun this. So we should get updated images, but our prompts should remain intact. Okay, there was an issue there. Too many requests. So we were getting rate limited by Dropbox. Let's put a little weight here. Save, tidy, test. Great. So perfect. We still have our image prompts and we have our updated images, and we can cycle through them quickly here. Okay. So that's great. We now have 2 additional helper functions. Awesome. And next, let's generate the video based on the image slideshow. Before we generate the images, I just want to get a feel for how well the segments are placed on the overall script. So we don't have any videos rendered yet, but let's go to the JSON to video workflow and test this out. Let's take a look.
Insecurity is very relatable. Most people are insecure about something. Maybe it's the size or shape of a body part. Maybe it's their economic status. Or maybe it's to do with aspects of their life journey. Remember that God created you in his or her image. There is a reason why you were made the way you are. Embrace it and leverage it. Every weakness can also be a strength. It's all in how you use it. Be blessed.
Nice. I think we can work with that. So what we're going to do is generate the videos for each segment, and then we'll stitch the videos together, but we'll have to manually edit them to make the timing super locked in. And we'll do some extra jazz and we'll have our final product. Okay, we're finally ready to use this image to video workflow. So here we're going to pull our segments, and if the make video checkbox is turned on for a particular segment, we're going to send it to File AI. To be exact, we're going to be sending it to Kling AI with this node. And I can see that I actually have a bug here. No pun intended. This should not be hard-coded. This should be the video prompt value of the segment. And it says no data. Everything went to the false branch. That's because none of these checkboxes are turned on. So you should be very careful with video generation in general because it's quite expensive. Probably what we should be doing is just testing one of these, right? Maybe just the first one, making sure that looks good. And once we have that refined, then we'll expand out to test them all. But anyhow, I'm going to risk it. So what we'll do is not hard code the prompt, right? So just for context, when you generate videos with Kling, you have to provide an image and a text prompt, right? That gets fed into Kling. And on the other side comes a video. So let's temporarily disconnect this so we don't kick this off. Well, there we go. So let's test that. Everything should come to the true branch. And that's the case. Every segment is checked on for the make video column. And if we connect this again, take a look, we have our values here. And the prompt we want to send is the video prompt, which at the moment is the same prompt as our image prompt. But you could tweak this if you wanted. Anyhow, So if we come over to file, you can see my balance is 2184. And if we come to the page for Kling, we get a cost estimate. So it says 5 seconds of video will render at the cost of $1.40. So we have 11 segments in this video script, and each segment, if I am accurate, is less than 5 seconds, right? So if we multiply 11 times 140, we get $15.40. And the balance of our account is above that, so we should be good. So let's tidy this up, save it. Take one more look just to make sure we're not messing anything up. That looks good to me. Yep. And let's kick this off. And yeah, you can see we're getting our video render request IDs, and we're resetting the make video checkboxes just to be safe. Once again, each time we run this, as you can see, it's costing like 15 or 20 bucks. We want to be very intentional with how we set this make video checkbox. Anyhow, if we come to files request page, we can see we have a bunch of renders in progress. So this should finish rendering as far as all these clips go, probably in about 5-10 minutes. So see you then. There we go. So we have all of our video clips generated. And now let's run the store video and Airtable workflow. And this should download the images and put them in Airtable so we can take a look. Here we can see the videos have been downloaded. Let's stitch all this together and see what it looks like. So let's come over to our JSON to video workflow and let's stitch all this together and check out the render logs, refresh. There we go.
Insecurity is very relatable. Most people are insecure about something. Maybe it's the size or shape of a body part. Maybe it's their economic status. Or maybe it's to do with aspects of their life journey. Remember that God created you in his or her image. There is a reason why you were made the way you are. Embrace it and leverage it. Every weakness can also be a strength. It's all in how you use it. Be blessed.
Nice. So let's now do some manual editing and spruce this up, and we'll have our final product. Alrighty, here I have a video editor by the name of Premiere Pro. There's other video editors you could use, for example, CapCut. There's another one called Camtasia. Find one that is intuitive to you. If you don't know which one to choose, I would recommend either CapCut or Premiere Pro. Those are the ones that I'm most familiar with. But anyhow, I downloaded the video that was generated by JSON to video, right? And what I'm going to do is drag it onto Premiere Pro and we can start editing it. So if I expand this, I see the video track up top and then the audio track on the bottom. So what we're going to do is adjust the switches of each scene so that it hits perfectly with the audio of the script. And where we can't adjust things how we want to, we'll download the full clip from Kling or from Airtable, because we have a reference to the clip in Airtable as well. And let's run through that and take a look at how it looks. I think what we'll do is make another workflow that lays out the clips in their full length in subsequent order. And then we can easily map this onto these hits, right? Here is that helper workflow. It's very similar to the JSON to video workflow. The key differences are how we define each scene. We're just taking the URL that comes from each segment and not defining the duration. This is how you let the video clip be whatever length it happens to be. And we're assuming, I suppose, that every segment has a video URL, which might not necessarily be the case in practice, depending on what you're trying to do. But anyhow, we can always tweak these as needed. And then finally, on the movie level of the JSON to video config, we're not adding the audio at the root. We're just laying out all of the video clips. So I ran this, and this is the final product. It's 55 seconds. So we have 11 segments. Each one is 5 seconds. That comes out to 55 seconds. And then I use that to pretty much have this manually adjusted version of the generated video hit perfect with the audio. So let's take a look.
Insecurity is very relatable. Most people are insecure about something. Maybe it's the size or shape of a body part. Maybe it's their economic status. Or maybe it's to do with aspects of their life journey. Remember that God created you in his or her image. There is a reason why you were made the way you are. Embrace it and leverage it. Every weakness can also be a strength. It's all in how you use it. Be blessed.
Okay, so let's add some music and some captions, and that's going to be it. So farewell. Live your life. Be blessed. Do great things. Be healthy. Protect the health of those around you. Protect your health. Take care of yourself. Be authentic. Honor God. Do whatever the fuck you want. And I owe my dad money. I will pay him back ASAP. Respect. Let's get it done.
Insecurity is very relatable. Most people are insecure about something. Maybe it's the size or shape of a body part. Maybe it's their economic status. Or maybe it's to do with aspects of their life journey. Remember that God created you in his or her image. There is a reason why you were made the way you are. Embrace it and leverage it. Every weakness can also be a strength. It's all in how you use it. Be blessed.